My name is Carolyn Gould. I'm president of the Chittenden County Historical Society, and I'd like to welcome all of you. The Chittenden County Historical Society is a all-volunteer, content-driven organization. So we don't have any bricks and mortar, as they say in retail. All we have are words and pictures and videos, and we publish a bulletin 4 times a year. We give these talks. CCTV, Town Meeting TV is great. They put them all, and we put them up, they video of them all, and we put them all online. And so we're all content driven, which means that our dues go toward supporting and disseminating research. And almost 100% of what we take in goes to supporting that effort. So that makes us a lot different. We're hoping to restart publishing again in the next year or so that we can publish some of the works that people are producing here. And now more than ever, the study of history is critical, as you all know. I want to thank the congregation of Ohavi Zedek for letting us have this talk here. We're honored for that. This has been our 60th year, and we had a celebration at Ethan Allen in this summer, where we had over 15 not-for-profits from Vermont, all supporting history and the preservation of historical documents, doing things for kids and kids and all of us. And it was really well attended. It was a 2-day event. We had speakers as well. We've also established this year 2 awards programs. One in honor of Lillian Baker Carlisle, who was one of the founders of the Chittenden County Historical Society, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award, which was given to David Blow. Some of you may know him. He is sort of like, he has probably amassed more information on Burlington than any other human being ever. We also are establishing the Sarah L. Dopp Prize to be given to a student at UVM's Historic Preservation. And it's now pretty small, but it's going to be awarded in 2026 for one of the students coming in this year to do a research project in Burlington. And we're hoping to raise money for that so that we can give them a little more than the pittance that we're giving them now. But anything helps, remember, when you're a college kid. In the back, we have totes, we have membership forms, we have some books on the 3-volume history of Burlington, which you can buy 1 for $15 or 3 for $45. It's got lots of information that's still relevant. It took 20 years to pull it together. It's a very interesting thing. We're always looking for new board members or people who want to serve on committees. And having said that, that's who we are. I'm so pleased to introduce Jeff and Aaron. I think a whole lot of you already know them. I got to know them because of the Lost Mural project, which I'm sure that all of you know something about. It's, to me, an incredible thing. And when I lived in Massachusetts, I got to know people who did the film on the lost wooden synagogues of Eastern Europe. And that was so much a part of the tradition that this Lithuanian mural came out of. And I just find that whole story so poignant and so terrifying, but the remembrance of it is beautiful. So as you know, most of you, Aaron is a retired attorney, and Jeff is a retired professor of history from St. Michael's, and president of the synagogue. I'm hoping, and they promised me, that they're going to put in some personal anecdotes about the North End and growing up here, which I love because I grew up in Oregon. So I love hearing stories about Burlington and adding them into my knowledge. My experience is totally different, as you can well imagine. So hearing about the North End provides stories that I love, and of course that wonderful movie or little film documentary, Little Jerusalem, filled in a whole lot of that. And Portland does have a very strong tradition, Jewish tradition. Many of the synagogues were founded by people from the Lower East Side of New York. So in any case, I don't know who's going first, but here is the presentation on a man I would have loved to have met, Rabbi Max Wall.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. The starting point is really quite simple. Aaron and I, once being young in the mid-1980s, Aaron came back to Burlington from law school. I came back from graduate school. The former lifelong archivist of the synagogue, man by the name of Myron Samuelson, who wrote a book on the history of the Jewish people in Burlington, had just passed, and the responsibility fell to two youngsters. The first thing we did on that occasion, since we were envisaging that there was a need to capture more information on the original Jewish community, is that we went to the Chittenden Historical Society and we asked for money. We asked, I think, for a princely sum of either $250 or $500. I can't remember. It was an outrageous request, but it was honored. And from my vantage point, everything subsequent, the mural, the arc, research, all the work really is a testimonial to your faith in us. So that's as much as you need to know, and we're just extraordinarily grateful. We have spent a good deal of time trying to reconstitute or recreate the original Jewish community. We were asked, however, in April by the Rabbi Wall Committee at St. Michael's College. There's an annual lecture that's delivered typically by a great scholar from somewhere around the world. They made
like us.
They made an exception, and they asked if the two of us would actually speak to Rabbi Wall, since no one had done so. And Aaron and I, though we had not really spent much time in the archives looking at Rabbi Wall's materials, finally sat down and began to look at some exquisite stuff, which enlightened all sorts of characteristics that we never imagined. So what you'll hear, probably more than you want to hear, but pretty much the research and the story that we'd like to tell you. So again, with gratitude to Carolyn and the Chittenden Historical Society. Born into an observant Jewish family in Poland in 1915, raised in Orthodox Jewish environments in Poland, Denver, Colorado, and New York City, it is unsurprising that Max Wall would find his calling as a rabbi. Indeed, with his family's resettlement in Denver in 1921 and later relocation to New York City in 1927, he follows a pretty linear progression, attending a Jewish day school, a high school seminary, followed by Yeshiva University, and then a rabbinic theological seminary in 1942. 3 months after his rabbinic ordination, he marries his lifelong partner, Miriam Pizer, Mimi, on October 18th, 1942, woman with whom he had fallen in love while helping direct a Jewish summer camp. They moved to Woodbury, New Jersey, where he serves a small temple Beth El congregation for just over a year. Neither he nor his family, though, could ever imagine the course that life would subsequently follow. First as a Jewish army chaplain serving in Germany between 1944 and 1946, and then as the rabbi of the Ohavi Zedek Synagogue. The story we'll tell builds upon existing scholarship that focuses on the experience of Jewish chaplains during World War II, including 2 published interviews with Rabbi Wall, seen here, drawing upon original research then from the Ohavi Zedek's archives, together with newly discovered records from the Jewish Theological Seminary, which were shared with us. We'll strive to connect Rabbi Wall's experiences as a chaplain between 44 and 1946 with his unparalleled achievements in reshaping Ohavi Zedek and the broader religious landscape across Vermont between 1946 and 1952. In 1915, at the age of 5 weeks, Max Wall's family, indeed the entire Jewish population of Ratna, Poland, flees their village after learning that the Cossacks are coming to attack the Jews. Resettling in Machayev, he experienced his first and earliest memory at age 3.5 years, when he describes playing with a hoop which accidentally rolled into a church. Quote, "Somebody comes out and swats me on the side of the head and calls me in Polish a dirty Jew Christ killer," unquote. A more joyful memory of his first 6 years was sitting on the knee of the Machayev rabbi, a man he felt was, quote, "the most important person in my life," pulling his beard, singing, learning my aleph bets, and being steeped in Orthodox traditions and practice, unquote. Relocating in Denver, Colorado to be closer to his mother's family and then resettling in New York City, his upbringing is totally grounded in Orthodox practice. Recalling his instruction in rituals and traditions, he noted, quote, "I learned it, it became a part of me, but it wasn't so good," unquote. Something was missing. Following his graduation in 1938 from Yeshiva University with a bachelor's and master's degree in Hebrew literature, Max Wall enrolls in the Jewish Theological Seminary rather than in the Orthodox Seminary. At the Jewish Theological Seminary, Max Wall recalled, quote, "I found the beginning of religious life, not learning, but religious life when I entered that seminary. And I began to ask questions. I began to hear questions, began to respond to questions, which were asked of me either by my teachers or by the works that I was reading. And then I began to realize I'm interested in the religious life. That is what I want to convey to people," unquote. And that realization would inspire his career as a teaching rabbi. Beyond that transformative understanding, the Jewish Theological Seminary, henceforth we'll call the JTS, which then as now was the religious, spiritual, and academic research center for the movement known as conservative Judaism. Now, this movement strives to articulate a, quote, "middle position," unquote, between the traditional Orthodox world and Reform Judaism, a movement that minimizes traditional practices in favor of a more rational, more universalistic appeal. At its core, conservative Judaism sought to renew the old and sanctify the new. In Rabbi Wall's words, quote, "both tradition and change, the old and new have a place." That's the basic philosophy of conservative Judaism, that we try and conserve as much as possible, unquote. A key figure shaping the conservative movement between the 1940s and 60s was a man by the name of Louis Finkelstein, who was the chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. He would later become a mentor, supporter, and lifelong friend of Rabbi Wall. Finkelstein helped usher in a period of unprecedented growth in the conservative movement. Under his leadership, the numbers of affiliated conservative synagogues rapidly increased from 190 in 1945 to more than 475 in 1950. Mere 5 years, tripling of the total number of conservative synagogues. And that's the time frame within which Ohavi Zedek becomes affiliated with the United Synagogues of America. At the center of Finkelstein's and the movement's efforts was the concept of a new entity, what they called a modern, quote, synagogue center, unquote. The entity was grounded in two principles. The first, egalitarianism, and gender-based exclusion. For Finkelstein, education is paramount, first as an instrument for reinvigorating congregations and then for teaching the larger American society to embrace the values of tolerance and respect for Judaism. The synagogue center model provided a single and compelling facility for the community to meet for prayer, for life cycle events, for education for Jewish students, for social and fundraising events. And to support this vision, Finkelstein and the JTS undertook to create materials and conferences, institutes, radio, television programs to spread their message. Rabbi Wall would carry many of these JTS initiatives to his adopted state of Vermont. In his quest to create a new Ohavi Zedek, while concurrently educating and reaching out to others, Rabbi Wall imagines a Jewish community center that, in his words, quote, is a part of the community, not apart from the community, unquote. While attending the seminary on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Shortly thereafter, Max Wall, together with other students, sought to enlist as military chaplains. All were rejected on the grounds that they lacked two prerequisites. First, they were not yet ordained, and second, they did not yet have 2 years of rabbinic pulpit experience. 2 years elapse, and in November 7th, 1943, Rabbi Max Wall receives news that he has been accepted to become a Jewish military chaplain. He is one of 311 rabbis accepted amongst more than 1,000 applicants. The first step in his military chaplainship involved a 5-week, quote, thorough training, unquote, at Harvard University, during which he describes interacting for the first time in his life with Protestant and Catholic clerics, teaching one another rituals for offering comfort and giving last rites. Rabbi taught his roommates the Shema prayer, the central Jewish prayer that's delivered traditionally upon death, the recognition of a single God. Rabbi Wall recalled, quote, "We got to know one another as human beings. It was an intimate relationship in which we were serving American GIs together," unquote. After a year at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, he receives notice in October of 1945 that he will be shipped to the war theater in Europe and that he was named the chaplain for the Army's 9th Infantry Division. That division's former Jewish chaplain had been tragically killed on a French battlefield several months earlier. Rabbi Wall and the other Jewish chaplains were drawn from the Orthodox, conservative, and Reform denominations and served in the European and Pacific war theaters. They were organized by the National Jewish Welfare Board's Committee on Army and Navy Religious Activities, what was known as CANRA, who oversaw their recruitment, their training, and their interfacing with the U.S. government and the military. As the American Jewish Historical Society has noted, the Jewish chaplains were the expected conduit between the military and their Jewish soldiers. That was expected. However, what the Army nor CANRA could not anticipate was that the Jewish chaplains in Europe would also serve as the first point of contact for survivors of the Nazi concentration camps and labor camps. This is an unprecedented challenge and a burden for the chaplains. In several interviews that Rabbi Wall gave, he recalled his experience as a chaplain between 1944 and 1946. He repeatedly highlighted a small number of memorable, life-changing events. And as we reflected on them, they really speak to Rabbi Wall's core convictions, his dedication to preserving what he called the, quote, remnant of the Jewish people, unquote, his efforts to promote interfaith understanding and education, and to challenge his own congregation to create a vibrant Jewish community center, synagogue center.
Before I begin the next section, I just want to say another few words on Myron Samuelson. So what's been interesting about this process is we are still discovering materials that Myron Samuelson collected from just after World War II about Rabbi Wall, including his briefcase, which we just discovered in one of our vaults, which contained all of his some of the original contracts of all clergy that Myron was working on as an attorney, and sermons and other pieces relating to interviews that he did with Doris Bergen. I also wanted to comment that the second book that you saw of Michael Hoberman teaches in Massachusetts, and he is a member with me of the New England Jewish Historical Collaborative, and has in that capacity wrote that book about Jewish communities in New England. But Myron also was responsible for helping us plan the 1985 centennial, which we have a lot of documents and a lot of video of in the synagogue. At his death, his wife and their daughters helped us build the display case that we have for the Ohavi Zedek archives, which includes Ohavi Zedek archival material, but on the left side, but it also includes on the right side the Judaica materials that he collected during his lifetime as an archivist. So upon arriving in Germany in late 1944, Rabbi Wall was given a Jeep and a driver. Driving his Jeep with a large Star of David visible on the hood and the word chaplain on either side, he later recalled being filled with terror at the prospect of being an easy target for snipers. But fear gave way to action and travel, often hundreds of miles a week in the Jeep in order to meet troops and offer religious services and distribute supplies. Following up on a message from a soldier, the rabbi ended up driving straight into a combat area with his driver. Instead of meeting a soldier in crisis, he discovered that the soldier simply wanted to meet the new rabbi and the new chaplain. Returning to headquarters, he was promptly reprimanded by his superior, who warned, quote, "If you ever do something as stupid as that again and you survive, I will personally kill you." According to Rabbi Wall, I was more embarrassed than anything else. I realized how foolish I had been, but I learned. In a newly discovered letter this last year from the Jewish Theological Seminary, dated April 10th, 1945, Chancellor Louis Finkelstein seeks words and news from Rabbi Wall, one of his mentees. In another letter, Rabbi Wall, responding to his mentor, responds on May 1, sharing some thoughts, declaring the chaplains, quote, "are doing constructive and enduring work, even though we are part of a machine that is dedicated to destruction." During and following the May Passover 1945 celebrations, Rabbi Wall writes, quote, describing the spiritual joy he felt while conducting a regular Seder and service at Remagen, Germany on the Rhine. He and his driver drove 1,000 miles to reach Jewish soldiers all over the front. Rabbi Wall wrote, "They had matzah and they were observing the ancient festival in the modern fashion by bringing light and liberties to the land of darkness. It was a great consolation for us who had to be so far from home and those we love, to be helping to destroy the enemies of all liberty, all human liberty and freedom." Beyond his work with servicemen, Rabbi Wall regularly faced the unexpected. In the first weeks of his chaplaincy, he encountered his first Jewish civilians, a small group of women who had found refuge in a German convent. They were unaware it was Hanukkah. So Rabbi Wall, quote, "It was the second night of Hanukkah, and I lit one candle, said the prayers, and told them the story of Hanukkah. Suddenly it struck me that these few survivors, they were the burning candle. I walked out of there as if I were walking on clouds. Hitler hadn't won. He hadn't won. The candle was still burning." In his interview, Rabbi Wall then repeated a Yiddish expression, "Kol zaman der Licht brennt, ist noch auf der Zeit," which translates as follows, "So long as the candle is burning, there is still time." Subsequent encounters occurred in the spring of 1945 as the war was winding down and involved displaced persons, or DPs. In one instance, while striving to help newly released prisoners from a Nazi labor camp in Ingolstadt, Germany, Rabbi Wall encountered a group of people still wearing their prison pajamas. He asked, "Why are you still wearing these pajama-type clothes? I understand that the UN Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, UNRWA, had already distributed clothing and rations and even quarters to displaced persons in the area." And they replied, "They wouldn't help us." "What do you mean they wouldn't help you?" the rabbis responded. Rabbi Wall puts on his military jacket, walked across the street to the UNRWA headquarters. Introducing himself to the person in charge, Rabbi Wall was informed by the other officer that I'm a retired officer of His Britannic Majesty's forces in Palestine. Responding to Rabbi's question on why these people hadn't received food or clothing, the colonel responded, "Oh, I wouldn't give anything to those Zionist bastards." Rabbi Wall recalled, "I then pulled the zipper of my jacket down, and on my collar I was wearing the 2 bars, emblem of the Jewish chaplains." Rabbi Wall then said, "You know, Colonel, I'm one of those Zionist bastards, and I'll be back." Walking back to the division headquarters, he communicated his anger to the adjutant in charge. Rabbi Wall listened with astonishment while the adjutant superior called Lieutenant General Bedell Smith, General Eisenhower's chief of staff. After retelling Rabbi Wall's story, the officer hangs up and tells him to wait here. In a little while, the adjutant returns with a cablegram. Rabbi Wall continues, as the officer reads it, a smile breaks out on his face. The officer says, "I don't usually see chaplains and use chaplains as messenger boys, but I think you would be very much like to deliver this message." Rabbi Wall then returned to the British officer with the telegram, which instructed him that he had been immediately relieved of his command and told to pack his bags and return back to Paris. While this is a small victory that Rabbi Wall repeatedly retold and savored, he was not yet aware of the full magnitude of the catastrophic results of the Nazi death camps and labor camps. Nor was he aware of the scope of the humanitarian crisis about to unfold, involving over 1 million displaced persons, including over 250,000 Jews then in Germany. Rabbi Wall wrote to Chancellor Finkelstein on May 1, 1945, describing the Nazi brutality. In May, after being stationed in Munich, Rabbi Wall went to the recently liberated concentration camp in Dachau. As he said, it was totally overwhelming. I saw some gaunt skeletons walking around very tentatively. I wanted to run away. I felt totally helpless. I was there with a Protestant chaplain, and the two of us just held each other, trying to find some strength from each other. It was very depressing. Rabbi Wall shared his experiences liberating the concentration camps and other forced labor camps with Chancellor Finkelstein. Quote, "In the last few weeks, I have seen evidence of the Nazi brutality that tore at my heart. I spoke to a number of Jews who had escaped, miraculously enough, from some of the Nazi extermination camps. I did what I could to help and gave them food, clothing, and medicine. Their stories and the sights that I saw hardened my heart. I know that I shall never be able to laugh as freely as I used to." On a practical level, the first thing that many survivors and other displaced persons wanted to do was have communication with their families. After being liberated, they wanted GIs to contact relatives in America to assure that they were alive. Attached to several of the Jewish displaced persons camps in Bavaria, Rabbi Wall began to explore other ways to facilitate communications and aid. He reached out to organizations, including the AFL-CIO, as well as other Jewish agencies, asking for help. As GIs went home, they in turn let relatives and others know that if they wanted to help, they could, quote, write or help by sending through Chaplain Max Wall, Army 9th Division, any packages in mail. Within a short while, letters and packages from relatives and others arrived, care of Rabbi Wall. His own 9th Infantry mailing address quickly became the unofficial postal headquarters for the DPs and was receiving more than 1,000 relief packages daily from around the world. For the 60 Jewish military chaplains who remained in Europe after peace was declared in May 1945, including Rabbi Wall, their ongoing responsibilities for meeting the religious needs of remaining troops were now further burdened by the need to help the DPs as best as they could. To restore the practice of Judaism among the DPs and the surviving Jewish communities all over Germany that they were encountering and entering the communities, Jewish chaplains also started Hebrew schools, cleansed and reopened synagogues and kosher kitchens, and served as rabbis to the survivors. Rabbi Wall participates in Munich in Rosh Hashanah services in September of 1945. One of his efforts, the services for those holidays, was then discussed and highlighted in the Jewish Theological Seminary newsletter distributed nationally to conservative synagogues across America. This bulletin reported that, quote, Chaplain Max Wall of New York, a graduate of JTS of America and a member of the Conservative Rabbinical Assembly, conducted the first Rosh Hashanah services to be held openly in Munich since the Nazis came to power in 1939. The services were held in the Prince Regent Theater, formerly the Munich Opera House, close quote. On another note, he also attached a lot of significance to the fact that those services were in the Munich Opera House because Hitler loved Wagner, and Wagner had was reputed to be a terrible anti-Semite, and there were many anti-Semitic propaganda pieces that were performed in the Munich Opera House. So there was a huge significance in having the services there. Traumatized by what he is seeing and physically and emotionally exhausted by satisfying the basic needs of the DPs, Rabbi Wall experiences deep anguish, depression, and at times despair. What drives Rabbi forward is the conviction that, quote, the remnant, the surviving remnant of the Jewish people must find a new home. According to the American Jewish Historical Society, this conviction is shared by all of the remaining Jewish chaplains. With ongoing restrictions in the number of displaced persons able to come to America, some things never change, and with the ongoing murders of Jews trying to return to their former homes, the vision for Palestine is one of a much-needed place of refuge. In October of 1945, Rabbi Wall attends the first Zionist conference of liberated Jews in Bavaria, held in Munich. At a lunch arranged by Chaplain Abraham Klausner for all military chaplains, Rabbi Wall sits next to David Ben-Gurion, soon to become Israel's first prime minister. Having witnessed the haunting images of the Nazi slave labor camps and the Nazi concentration camps at Dachau and Auschwitz, Rabbi Wall asks Ben-Gurion what will become of the Jewish people. David Ben-Gurion turns to him and repeats three simple and single words: we will be. We will be. Rabbi Wall later remembers and cherishes those three little words as an ongoing inspiration for his lifelong rabbinate. Another uplifting experience, this time quite ecumenical in nature, occurs in April of 1946. Rabbi Wall describes being the sole chaplain in a small Bavarian town available to conduct Easter services for the troops. He arranges with former chaplain's assistants to provide music, and he delivers a sermon in a bombed-out church, what he called, quote, a beautiful setting. For his Easter message, he focused, quote, on the need to affirm life in the face of such death as we have witnessed, close quote. He describes the group uninhibitedly talking for more than 6 hours on the meaning of life, Jews, Christians, Judaism, Christianity, the destruction of the Jewish community in Europe, and anti-Semitism. The rabbi then recalled one of the GIs came over to me and said, "This is going to look very silly, but I'd like to kiss you. You've made me a better Christian." Rabbi Wall further elaborated, "And I never felt as much at home in any synagogue service that I attended subsequent to that church service." That's how intimate and close things were for all of us at that time.
Upon his return to America in April of 1946, it is evident that the war and its aftermath had exacted its toll on him. The rabbi recalled significant weight loss, chain smoking, and depression. Quote, "We were living temporarily with my parents, a new baby, and 2 young nervous parents in a small apartment. No freedom, no privacy," unquote. On top of that, the rabbi characterized himself, quote, as an angry man, unquote, burdened by his still raw experiences. Rabbi Wall's wife, Mimi, later recalled, quote, "He came home an anxious, gaunt man with an eye tic. I did not recognize him when he debarked from the New York boat. He looked like a DP, a displaced person," unquote. Within weeks after his return, while searching for a rabbinic pulpit, he is notified by the JTS of an opening for a rabbi in Burlington, Vermont. The Ohavi Zedek Synagogue congregation in Burlington was Orthodox at the time, but had written to the conservative seminary by mistake, as it turns out, with the OZ elders believing that they were writing to the Orthodox Rabbinic Assembly. Arriving in his military uniform in June 1946, Rabbi Max Wall was met in Burlington at the train station by 2 older men. As they neared Burlington's Old North End Jewish community, Rabbi Wall recalled its appearance resembled that of an aging Eastern European Jewish village. He was turned off by what he saw, as well when he interacted with many of the elders of the community. He later recalled finding them, quote, largely non-observant Orthodox Jews, unquote, people who wanted their rabbi to be an observant Orthodox Jew while they hid their hands behind their backs while smoking on Shabbos, unquote. He found the community's knowledge of Jewish history, quote, to be terribly ignorant, unquote. He learned that the Hebrew school located in another building down the street from Ohavi Zedek Synagogue had been experiencing a significant decline in enrollment, with numbers plummeting to fewer than 20, and with sporadic attendance by many students. He characterized the community, quote, as failing, unquote, and found, quote, little evidence that its young people were engaged, unquote. During the drive to the synagogue, Rabbi Wall is taken aback when he's asked to give his first sermon in Yiddish. He observed that 2 other Jewish speakers had been scheduled to speak in Yiddish during the morning services on behalf of their own institutions, seeking funds from the congregation. Thus, he was found himself relegated to speaking during Shabbos evening, a much less attended occasion, but he reluctantly complies. He remembers thinking, quote, "I hadn't gone to the Jewish Theological Seminary to come back to work at a Yiddish-speaking, non-observant community," unquote. At the end of the sermon, he is asked point blank by a congregant, quote, "So, how much do you want?" unquote. To which the rabbi responds, quote, "If that is the first question you have of me, it shouldn't be. You should be asking whether I want to come here. And the answer is no. This is not the place for me. I do not want to come to a community that looks like it's falling apart," unquote. And with that, he returned to New York City. A few days later, he receives a call from Rabbi Margolis, the head of the rabbinic placement at the JTS. Rabbi Margolis informs him that the Burlington community had called yet again, and that they, in particular, the younger congregants, wanted him as their rabbi. "You've got to go," Margolis advised him. as JTS has been trying to get a conservative rabbi in these parts for years. Rabbi Wall reports that he hadn't seen very many young people during his first visit, yet he agreed to return to Burlington in early July for a second visit. Once back in Burlington, he meets with a smaller group of younger congregants with whom he has immediate rapport. Many themselves are veterans. Veterans, then totaling almost a third of the adult Jewish male residents in Burlington, listen and embrace the rabbi's visions for a Jewish community grounded in a modern synagogue center. The rabbi is buoyed by this reception to his message. Agreement is reached after further negotiations. Still, before agreeing to come, Rabbi Wall exacts 3 promises from the congregation. 1, the young people who had been discussing separating and forming their own congregation would not do so, in order for Rabbi Wall to have a unified Ohavi Zedek. 2nd, the Ohavi Zedek Synagogue would utilize the new JTS prayer book compiled by Rabbi Morris Silverman. And 3rd, the rabbi is hiring a rabbi, and not the rabbi's wife. As Rabbi Wall puts it, quote, Miriam can do whatever she wishes, including wearing bobby socks, unquote. Rabbi Wall does not realize during his second visit that a small group of these men and women with whom he meets will eventually step up during the next 6 years and beyond to serve as his stalwarts. They will provide steady and ardent support, more critically, a willingness to partner as community leaders in realizing his ambitious agenda. After agreeing to terms, a 1-year contract is signed, beginning on August 18, 1946. A copy of that contract, which Aaron referenced, we've only discovered recently in our archives, includes explicit language stipulating, quote, the rabbi shall be known as the community rabbi, unquote. From the moment of his arrival, he launches a systemic campaign to transform and reinvigorate the Burlington Jewish community. His focus begins and involves operationalizing the key elements of Finkelstein's vision for a modern Jewish community center, grounded in egalitarianism, education, and engagement within this congregation and within the larger community. Almost immediately, he announces a later start for Friday night services so that more people could attend. Believing the old synagogue's balcony seating for women, quote, was old-fashioned and small-townish, unquote, he also declares that women can sit with men in the main pews on an egalitarian basis on Friday night services. Concurrently, he introduces additional English-speaking readings into his services with announced pages to accommodate full and equal participation. A second target area for educating his congregation was the largely moribund Hebrew school, or Talmud Torah, for which he bore responsibility. Joined by Hebrew school teacher Harry Kahn, the rabbi later recalled that they, during the summer of 1946, quote, literally went from Jewish home to Jewish home across Burlington and registered almost all of the Jewish kids who were available, unquote. And this fact is confirmed by the Education Committee's December 4th, 1946 minutes, which we looked at, which recorded 95 students, up from 19 the previous year. While boosting student numbers, he expressed regular discontent with the separate locale of the Hebrew school building. The Hebrew school building is on North Winooski. The current legal aid building was then the Talmud Torah building. Rabbi Wall later recalled telling the students, quote, to pray for cracks in the ceiling to become larger to support his chorus for a new community center that would include a Hebrew school. On the first day of Rosh Hashanah in September of 1945, Rabbi Wall, as the new community rabbi, clearly made clear his determination to challenge the religious practices of the Burlington Orthodox community. For his first high holiday sermon, he announced that he did not believe in the traditional ritual of tashlech, which is the casting of one's sins into a flowing body of water. He maintained that tashlech was based on superstition, that it was an Eastern European custom, not Jewish theology. Former Ohavi Zedek archivist and Wall advocate and stalwart Myron Samuelson describes the reaction in his book from the Jewish community. Quote, "This blow was shocking to the older group, accepted by the younger, but no doubt a disappointment to the youngest, who, while their elders were casting away their sins, were then stealing apples from the laden trees in the orchard near the Winooski River," unquote. For some, the rabbi's ordination in the Jewish Theological Seminary, the conservative branch of Judaism, further testified to his own orthodoxy. According to Samuelson, some elders referred to him privately, quote, as our Protestant rabbi, unquote. In another instance, his robe was maliciously slashed by a Jewish Ohavi Zedek dissident. Interestingly, Rabbi Wall recalled afterward in an interview that the congregation following that event had bought him a new and nicer $75 robe, something he posited, quote, helped unite the congregation, unquote. Rabbi Wall next targeted two community customs to further enhance his authority. He announced he was discontinuing the process of bidding for synagogue honors on holidays, as well as all Shabbos solicitations from Jewish itinerant institution fundraisers. Instead, he directed his congregants to donate to a new fund, the Rabbi's Special Fund, which he subsequently uses to pay for students to come to Burlington to assist him, for him to attend JTS conferences on education and rabbinic assembly conferences, and also to buy books, to pay for the JTS summer camps for his congregants, and to offer help to people in need.
Next in his quest to remake his new congregation, Rabbi Wall turned his attention to creating the organizational arms of the congregation. On October 27, 1946, he established the Ohavi Zedek Men's Club with 31 members. A mainstay of the Jewish Theological Seminary's vision, men's clubs, locally and in organized regional networks, strove to strengthen the Jewish home, synagogues, and the conservative movement. And I just want to give context. So prior to the synagogue becoming a conservative institution, the Orthodox synagogues, we have 3 Orthodox synagogues who all build the Orthodox Hebrew school. So writing to the Jewish Theological Seminary by mistake moves us, is an impetus to moving us into the conservative direction. But this is all part of Rabbi Wall's plan. In Rabbi Wall's first contract, the Men's Club pursues diverse forms of engagement rooted in rebuilding brotherhood and Jewish community. Our archives records capture this diversity. In its first months of weekly meetings, there was a canned goods collection to send food overseas, spirited conversations on how to bolster service attendance, a cantorial concert, a lecture on biblical prophets, and presentations on Yiddish poets and authors, just to name just a few. To digress just a minute, the Yiddish poetry is run by Ben Zion Black, who's very interested in promoting Yiddish both in terms of arts and poetry and literature, and is running these Yiddish poetry seminars through the synagogue and the men's club. In February 1947, Rabbi Wall invites his friend and fellow JTS graduate and World War II Jewish chaplain, Rabbi Morris Dembowitz, as a guest speaker. Rabbi Dembowitz, who had also liberated the concentration camps and worked with the DPs in Germany, forcefully conveys his message. Quote, "In the face of challenges, including assimilation, we can create our own destiny if we will it, much as the Jews of Europe and Palestine are doing it." He urges his audience to, quote, "create a Jewish community that would enable every Jew to become a master of his own destiny rather than a victim of his faith," close quote. Rabbi Wall makes sure that his stalwarts, the leaders of the congregation, the younger people in particular, become leaders within the men's club, women's sisterhood, and the Hebrew School Educational Committee, continue to connect with other JTS-sponsored programs, and to affiliate with conservative Jewish synagogues. He and synagogue president Charles Samuelson attend the Conservative Movement's Conference of Unions of United Synagogues, which Samuelson then reports to the men's club and encourages him. "We are not alone in our attempts to resuscitate the Jewish spirit," he writes. In concert with the men's club, a new parallel women's group, Sisterhood, was revitalized and reinvigorated both by Rabbi Wall and his wife Mimi Wall. Its purpose in fostering a new atmosphere of egalitarianism was, quote, "to assign a certain portion of the United Synagogue's work to women and to give them a share of its activities," close quote. For this to happen, Mimi Wall, upon her arrival in November 1946, took leadership in Sisterhood as the educational chair. In a later interview, Mimi explains that she was reticent to become further involved and engaged at this time while caring for their young children, they have 3 daughters. She and Rabbi Wall then imagined that his Burlington position would then be temporary, lasting only 1 year when he first started. They then envisioned that they would return to New York to be closer to their own families that were in the New York and New Jersey area. With each passing year in Burlington, she gets deeply involved in Sisterhood, the Ohavi Zedek Library, and later in the Hebrew School. Like Men's Club, Sisterhood is tasked with extensive and diverse undertakings, including education, social celebrations, holiday celebrations, fundraising, and other activities supporting the well-being of the youth and the members of the synagogue. In December 1946, details of some of the Sisterhood activities are noted. This bulletin highlights the Sisterhood budgetary programs for the next year, including prizes for outstanding Hebrew Free School students, making arrangements for the celebrations of all festivals, as well as the annual banquet of the Burlington Hebrew Holy Burial Society, and funding the purchase of additional Sabbath prayer books for the synagogue. Feeling lonely during his first 5 months in Burlington, and without his family who were still in New York, and without Jewish colleagues nearby, the rabbi draws upon his chaplain's experience in Europe to embrace ecumenicism and comradeship with non-Jewish clergy. As he later recalled, quote, "I realized early on that if I were to have any spiritual and intellectual fellowship here, it needed to be in the non-Jewish community." There is another reason for reaching outside the synagogue. Rabbi Wall's rabbinic predecessors appeared only sporadically in newspaper articles and then only to highlight synagogue activities and religious events. In contrast, Rabbi Wall, during his first year alone, is featured in more than 24 articles reporting on his local engagements outside of his congregation. Within days of his August 1946 arrival, Rabbi Wall joins Burlington Mayor John Burns and fellow clergymen and several local businessmen in the local Kiwanis Fall Harvest Supper with more than 600 attendees. On December 14th, 1946, he joins Christian clergy at the Kiwanis Tri-Faith meeting, quote, to bring Christmas messages from their respective faiths, close quote. In his brief remarks, Rabbi Wall observed, quote, that there is no need to talk of interfaith, but there is a great need for man to practice and live his faith outwardly, close quote. As a former Jewish chaplain and World War II veteran, Rabbi Wall seized additional opportunities to speak and act in a variety of settings, including local elementary schools, parent-teacher associations, area church clubs, and speaks often on the themes of experiences of an Army chaplain and through the eyes of a World War II chaplain. He not only stays local, he is traveling all over Vermont. During his first contract year, Rabbi Wall enthusiastically travels to rural Vermont in his quest to address religious ignorance and prejudice, while also cultivating meaningful relationships with fellow clergy. Just as he becomes the first contact in Europe for survivors and DPs, he also becomes, for many instances, the first contact for Jewish clergy and many non-Jewish, for non-Jewish clergy and for many non-Jewish congregants in other churches and in other places. During his first year, he visits churches in St. Johnsbury, Swanton, Barry, East Berkshire, and St. Albans, to name a few, speaking to Congregational, Methodist, Baptist, Unitarian, and Episcopal churches. In addition, he's the featured speaker at the Franklin County Ministerial Association and the Vermont Congregational Conference. The rabbi's message emphasizes religious understanding across denominations. Quote, brothers and sisters, God meant for the world of nations and creeds to be different, but not unequal, close quote. Advocating for a full revival of religious reasoning and religious life across denominations, the rabbi declared, without faith, there cannot be brotherhood, close quote. Beyond lectures and presentations, for Passover in April 1947, Rabbi Wall conducts a model Passover Seder for the broader community. So too, his educational mission extends to youth. We have a letter in our archives from a chaperone of a group of Christian boys and girls who visited the synagogue on a Shabbat morning in March of 1947. She wrote, quote, we owe our religion to those of your race. The world owes the Jewish people a great debt, close quote. While Rabbi Wall's efforts locally were heartening to him, the plight of displaced persons continues to weigh on his conscience. Sharing with his congregation the first edition of the Ohavi Zedek Bulletin in December of 1946, which archivist Myron Samuelson is responsible for binding, so we have dozens of these voices that are all bound, which is why we were able to find all this information. He writes and expresses his, quote, hope that the day will come when all the nations of the earth will recognize the righteousness of our cause and help us to dedicate our land in a spirit of peace, equality, and human freedom, close quote. Within the OZ congregation, Rabbi Wall mobilized every organization to raise funds for the DPs, the displaced persons, including the B'nai B'rith Girls, the Young Judea Youth Group, Sisterhood, and the Men's Club. The Women's Division of the United Jewish Appeal, having heard a heart-rending story from Rabbi Wall about their brothers and sisters in Palestine, undertook a fundraising campaign with the goal of securing $50 from each Jewish woman in the community. Rabbi Wall reached far beyond his local congregation to make his case for the displaced persons. In January of 1947, he spoke to the Men's Club at St. Paul's Methodist Church about the refugees. 2 months later, he spoke about them in the Swanton Methodist Church. So too in April, he speaks to the Ladies' Aid Society of the First Congregational Church in East Berkshire, having been introduced, quote, as Vermont's authority on the Jews in international affairs, close quote. His message, highlighting the pogroms of Jews trying to return to their homelands in Poland and Hungary following the war's end, the seizure of property of absent refugees, and the reality for many of the surviving remnant that returning to their homelands was impossible and in many cases meant certain death. Having been given a strong vote of confidence by the OZ board and by the congregation in April of 1947 in the form of a new 3-year contract, Rabbi Wall continues his fervent efforts on Israel's behalf. A few days later, an article in the Free Press reports that Burlington Jewry had raised $70,000 of its $93,500 goal for the United Jewish Appeal, a substantial share of which was dedicated for Palestine. But this process also extends far beyond the walls of this synagogue. Significantly, non-Jews were asked to contribute funds to raise the local quota, and prominent local business leaders are listed in our digest with our Myron Samuelson's archives, agreeing to spearhead this effort. Their collective prayers would be answered on May 15th, shortly after Israel's declaration of independence, when the Truman administration becomes the first nation to recognize the state of Israel. During Rabbi Wall's second contract, running between 1947 and 1950, Rabbi Wall's activities and the tone of his messages demonstrate growing confidence, stature, and determination to foster change at an ever more accelerating pace. Within his congregation, he continues his campaign to build Jewish life and practice based on the conservative model of Judaism from the Jewish Theological Seminary. With large and growing numbers expected for high holiday services in September of 1948, Rabbi Wall conducts staggered sermons running between the Ohavi Zedek Synagogue on Archibald Street and the former Chayalim Synagogue on Hyde Street, where he enlists his father to preside over services in order for him to make the switch. In October 1948, he announced that he would be leading monthly adult education services on topics including beginners and advanced Hebrew, Jewish history, and religious practices. The following month, November of 1948, he's preaching on, quote, intermarriage and the traditional modern approach to it, close quote, and guests from Waterbury, Montpelier, and Barry attend. In March of 1949, he gathers Men's Club and Sisterhood members together for a Sunday brunch made by the men to speak, quote, on a program for creative Judaism, close quote. And in June, as part of his ongoing efforts to network within Jewish Theological Seminary, he attends the Conservative Movement's Rabbinic Assembly Convention to discuss matters of national import. On a more substantive level of achievement, he finally succeeds in 1949 in seating women with the men as equals during Shabbat morning services. Shortly thereafter, the rabbi and the Jewish Theological's goal is realized when Ohavi Zedek Synagogue formally affiliates with the Jewish Theological Seminary administered under the United Synagogue Conservative Movement on April 10th, 1950, 2 years before this building is built. All the while he builds upon his success, Rabbi Wall continues to wrestle with unfinished business. Youth education continues to nag at him, as does absenteeism. In January 1949, he and Harry Kahn attend the Jewish Theological Seminary's National Jewish Education Conference in New York City. Harry Kahn is then serving as the Director of Education, and he becomes a professor at the university. Facetiously, writing in his congregation to The Voice, Rabbi Wall characterized the conference as, quote, disappointing that it did not provide any miraculous technique or method to create Jewish scholars out of children who get no more than 6 hours a week of school and whose parents feel that those 6 hours are too much, close quote. Acknowledging the work yet to be done, the rabbi announces in September at the start of the school year the creation of a special Sunday school activity for 6-year-olds. To digress for a moment, Jeff and I have fond memories of going to Hebrew school 3 times a week, Saturday mornings, mandatory services, and then Sunday for youth group. Beyond his congregation, Rabbi Wall broadens his outreach to the larger Vermont Jewish community. In November 1949, the copy of The Voice, the bound volumes that Myron Samuelson did for us, the heading reads, quote, Rabbi Wall becomes itinerant preacher and book salesman. Rabbi Wall is making a circuit tour visiting our outlying northern Vermont Jewish communities, presenting a pre-Passover talk about how not to lose sight of Jewish culture, close quote. Fostering education, understanding, and respect for Jews and Judaism within the larger non-Jewish Vermont community remains a priority. His status as a former military war chaplain continues to afford him regular opportunities to speak directly on issues of war and peace. He is now unabashedly direct. For Memorial Day in 1947, he joins fellow chaplains and clergymen to discuss and address a service honoring Burlington High School war dead. There he prays, quote, for as much leadership and energy in promoting peace as there was in prosecuting the war, close quote. Later he speaks to the Winooski veterans of foreign wars, saying, quote, let us push aside the curtains of darkness and ignorance and forget group animosities to prove our real desire for peace, close quote. Even more adamant the following year, he made the pronouncement, quote, that war is a denial of God. Living and accomplishing for our country is as much a greater form of patriotism and should be recognized by all as our goal. So too, he continues to develop connections with prominent individuals from Vermont's political and social elites. In January 1948, he participates with the governor at the annual Boy Scouts meeting in Barrie, and in 1947, he was then selected to fill the post of the state chaplain for Vermont's American Legion, the first person of the Jewish faith ever chosen.
So the last story we want to tell involves the construction of Rabbi Wall's new Jewish synagogue center, rooted in Chancellor Finkelstein's JTS model of a modern Jewish home. This quest occupied Rabbi Wall's thoughts from the moment he arrived in August of 1946 until this building's construction and dedication in August of 1952. The effort succeeds only because of Rabbi Max Wall's vision, his determination, and his leadership. He is able to mobilize all of the people he had cultivated within his, throughout his congregation and beyond, statewide, with further support from his JTS and longtime chaplain friends. 14 months after arriving in Burlington in October of 1947, Max Wall and the Ohavi Zedek Synagogue launched an effort, quote, for a new synagogue center, unquote, with the goal of raising $250,000 for an all-inclusive facility under one roof. At its December 1st, 1947 meeting, the synagogue's board of governors, now composed of Rabbi Wall's stalwarts, appointed a 4-person building steering committee to consider, quote, erecting a new Jewish community center, unquote. Rabbi Wall is elected honorary chairman of that committee. On January 20th, 1948, Public Relations Chairman Myron Samuelson and Rabbi Wall print the first edition of, quote, Our Future, unquote, an additional monthly community newsletter dedicated exclusively to communicating with the congregation about the new synagogue center building campaign. Its focus serves to educate the congregation about its history, to imbue pride in their community, and to advocate for the campaign. Most interestingly, it includes a detailed and regularly updated monthly, quote, list of pledges, unquote, specifying how much money each individual has donated. Ah, those good old days. The vast majority of funds raised during the building campaign were in the form of pledged insurance policies purchased by congregants from the National Life Insurance Company of Vermont. It is significant that Dean Davis, president of the National Life Company, who referred to Rabbi Wall, quote, as my good friend, unquote, agreed to use the dozens of Ohavi Zedek policies as collateral for issuing a $200,000 loan from National Life Insurance Company for the construction of the building. During February 1948, Rabbi Wall and his team create a memorials gift committee to allow congregants to make large gifts by endowing particular items or spaces in memory of loved ones. The March 1948 issue announces the installation of an 8-foot-high thermometer in front of the Hebrew Free School to record the growth of the new synagogue building fund campaign. Rabbi Wall, in his regular message to his congregants, acknowledges a growing number of, quote, naysayers who, for one reason or another, begin to find obstacles in the way of success, who are prone, for one reason or another, to find obstacles, who are prone to criticize overmuch, and who tend to be discouraged, unquote. Encouraging his congregants to support his vision for the new synagogue center, he writes, quote, even more important than your money is the wholehearted support given to your rabbis and lay leaders in their efforts to make Judaism the way of life for all. With emphasis on inclusivity and full participation, the rabbi and his stalwarts redoubled their fundraising efforts. In this spirit, the next Your Future Bulletin announces that 3 women have joined the steering committee. Within the Ohavi Zedek congregation, seemingly every organization is actively raising money, and this includes the Jewish War Veterans Youth Group affiliates, Knights of Pythias, Sisterhood Men's Club. Mimi Wall launches a Sisterhood brick campaign. We actually have that picture out in the hallway here. A brick campaign to encourage congregants to purchase $10 coupons to buy bricks for the building. Events are scheduled outside of the synagogue to engage the larger Burlington community. Dances are held at the Burlington Country Club in the Hotel Vermont. And so too, Rabbi Wall and his stalwart business friends coordinate a meeting at the Mary Fletcher Hospital with other community leaders. When Rabbi Wall begins to speak, he recalls being interrupted by Fritz Shepherdson, head of the hospital, who said, quote, this man has done so much for the city of Burlington, let me speak for him instead, unquote. And according to Rabbi Wall's recollections, Shepherdson's stewardship of the meeting raised tens of thousands of dollars. In March of 1950, the steering committee announced the purchase of the Fern Hill property on North Prospect Street to the congregation. The Burlington Free Press described this, quote, as one of the largest residential sales in years, unquote. And following the building lot purchases, discussions during the fall of 1950 progressed to the interior of the new building. The full congregation was asked to weigh in on the best design for the community's usage. During January of 1951, at a congregational meeting, a motion was made and accepted for a dual-functioning auditorium and gymnasium, which you're sitting in. Concurrent with the building campaign in early March 1951, the Ohavi Zedek Voice Minutes announced the board's decision to amend the synagogue's bylaws to grant women full voting privileges. This decision, lauded in the Voice, announced that the vote, quote, marked a step to guarantee the success of the new synagogue center. We salute the wisdom and the farsightedness of this decision, unquote. By May of 51, sufficient funds were in hand, and a contract was awarded to the Burlington architects, French Freeman. In October 1951, a cornerstone laying ceremony was held. As building plans took form, Rabbi Wall personally took leadership of designing the building's interior. The October 18, 1950 Voice reports the rabbi's recent trip to New York City to see several new Jewish centers. The OZ Voice archives record that he also personally travels with synagogue officers to make the purchase of the sanctuary's religious objects, including the Torah reading table, the eternal light, and the ark for the Torah scrolls. He also gives input to congregant Ben Stein, the architect who designs the etched glass windows in the main sanctuary, featuring the 12 tribes of Israel and other Jewish symbols.
The Building Steering Committee, just prior to the August 1952 dedication ceremony, issues a financial document humorously entitled, An Enlightened Community is a Healthy Community. Among its findings, the campaign reports that the total cost of the synagogue center building has increased from the projected $250,000 to almost $337,000, including $52,500 for the purchase of the North Prospect Street site. As of August 1952, the fundraising produced 303 pledges totaling just over $256,000. In 5 years' time, the steering committee projected that the congregation will then owe will then own property consisting of almost $340,000, but will then only owe $46,000 on its mortgage, having reduced the principal on the mortgage from the sale of both the Ohavi Garam, the old Ohavi Zedek building, the old Chittenden Synagogue building, and from sale of some of the commercial lots that are able to be purchased on Riverside Avenue at the original purchase. But some of them are sold and some of them are leased. All of that reduces the mortgage. With the dedication of the Ohavi Zedek Synagogue on August 31st, 1952, Rabbi Wall has his modern home with all the community facilities under one roof. It's an impressive building with its main sanctuary, which we'd be delighted to show you, a separate memorial chapel, modern classrooms, a library, kitchen, offices, a rabbi's study, a multi-use auditorium and gymnasium with locker rooms, a social lounge, youth group meeting room, and a sisterhood gift shop. The dedication ceremony is highlighted by the processional walking of the Torah scrolls, flanked by adults and children from their old home on Archibald Street to their new home on North Prospect Street. Because of the commitment of Myron Samuelson to our archives, we also have that tape of the video from the March of Torahs. And because of one of his relatives, Kerry Bub Sager, we also have a notification as to who the people are that are marching as they come into our sanctuary doors. Ohavi Zedek community's leaders characterized the move to the new synagogue as a rededication to the core principles of a vibrant Jewish community. Rabbi Wall humbly acknowledges others, quote, "A small but determined group of men and women have made our dreams of a synagogue center come true," close quote. This move, he insisted, quote, "meant no break with the past, but is a further step in the growth of our congregation," close quote. In a newly discovered interview reflecting upon the successful building campaign, he expressed himself in simple terms. "I built this, I didn't touch a trowel, but I agitated, I screamed, I got it." He further reflected upon the support of the non-Jewish community. "We were supported by our Christian friends who participated and even contributed their money to the building of the new synagogue. They wanted the Jewish community to be proud of their house of worship." In 6 short years, from 1946 to 1952, Rabbi Wall, with his wife Miriam, collaborated in building a new synagogue center, the Ohavi Zedek Synagogue Center for congregants within the conservative Jewish tradition to affirm their Jewish identity and celebrate religious life with pride while being an integral part of the broader community. Let's give Rabbi Wall the last word about his new building. The synagogue is not just a symbol, but a powerhouse capable of generating the heat, light, and power that each generation needs to live, grow, and build a legacy to those who follow. Thank you very much.